The pen shook in my hand. Not from the chemo. From rage I was forcing myself to hide. "You don't need to worry about the details," he said, standing in the doorway of my hospital room, still wearing his wedding ring. "Just sign where the doctor said. Less stress is better for you." I looked at the folder on my lap. Then I looked at him. "Sign what exactly, Daniel?" He didn't answer. He just smiled, the same smile he'd given me at our wedding 16 years ago. I signed. But not what he thought I was signing. "My name is Renata Cole. I'm 44 years old. 14 years ago, I started a boutique event design company out of my garage with $1,100 and a second-hand sewing machine. By the time I got my diagnosis, that company, Cole and Ivory Events, was worth $2.3 million, and I owned every share of it. I built it while raising 2 kids. I built it while my husband, Daniel, found himself through 4 different failed business ventures I quietly bankrolled. I built it while telling myself that a marriage is a partnership, that what's mine is his, that trust is the whole point. Stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. That's what the letter said. 18 months of treatment ahead of me, maybe less if I was lucky. And $2.3 million sitting in my name, plus the house, plus a $400,000 life insurance policy Daniel had taken out on me 3 years earlier, his idea, just to be responsible. I remember thinking, lying in that hospital bed the night I got the diagnosis, that at least I had Daniel. At least I had my daughter Priya, 22, home from college to help. At least I had my family. I was wrong about one of those things almost immediately. For days after my diagnosis, I asked Daniel to bring me a phone charger from home. He forgot it twice. The third time, my sister-in-law brought it instead, and when she handed me my old phone to transfer some photos, it was still logged into our shared cloud backup. I wasn't snooping. I was moving pictures of my kids as toddlers into an album, something to look at during infusions. And there, in the same camera roll, synced automatically, the way phones do when you don't think to check, were photos that weren't mine. A woman in a red dress, mid-laugh, glass of champagne in hand, sitting on my husband's lap at a restaurant I didn't recognize. Timestamped 6 days after my diagnosis. Daniel's tie was loosened. Her hand was inside his collar. I didn't cry. I remember that clearly, I didn't cry. I just felt the hospital blanket under my fingers, thin and scratchy, and I thought, I built a company from $1,100. I can survive this too. I said nothing to Daniel. Instead, over the next 2 weeks, between infusions, I quietly asked my paralegal friend, Monique, to help me pull our joint bank statements. There it was. A recurring charge, $1,200 a month, to an apartment complex across town. Not our mortgage. A second lease. When I finally asked Daniel about it, calm, sitting up in bed, for still taped to my arm, he barely blinked. "It's for storage, Ren. For the business stuff. Overflow inventory. You know how tight the garage is. $1,200 a month for storage? Climate controlled. For the linens. You'd want that." I said, "That makes sense," and I smiled, and I let it go out loud. 3 weeks later, still bald from the first round of chemo, wrapped in a scarf, I asked Priya to drive me to get a second opinion at a different hospital. On the way, we passed Daniel's car in the parking lot of a law office. Not our family attorney's office. A different one, Whitfield and Marsh Estate Planning. I had Monique pull the public filing index. 2 weeks after my diagnosis, Daniel had filed paperwork initiating a spousal incapacity review, a legal mechanism that, if a doctor certified I was mentally unfit due to illness and medication, could transfer financial decision-making power to him, including control of Cole and Ivory Events. When I confronted him, this time with the papers on the kitchen table between us, he didn't even flinch. "It's a precaution, Ren. Cancer patients on this kind of chemo regimen experience documented cognitive impacts, chemo brain, they call it clinically. I talked to an elder law specialist. It's standard risk mitigation for family assets during a health crisis. I'm protecting us. Protecting us, I repeated. You'd do the same for me." I told him I understood. I told him I was grateful he was thinking ahead. I even squeezed his hand. That night, I lay awake and realized he wasn't protecting anything. He was building a paper trail to take my company while I was too sick to stop him. Round 4 of chemo left me too nauseated to get out of bed most days, so I mostly stayed on the couch downstairs, wrapped in blankets, invisible in the way sick people become invisible in their own homes. People start talking around you instead of to you. One evening, Daniel was in the kitchen with his brother, Marcus, both of them assuming I was asleep. "She's not going to make it past the trial phase, honestly," Daniel said, voice low but not low enough. "Even if she does, once the incapacity filing goes through, doesn't matter. I get signing authority either way." Marcus laughed. "And the girlfriend? Camille? She know the plan?" "She knows there's 2.3 million reasons to be patient." I lay very still under that blanket. I remember counting my own breaths to keep from making a sound. Camille. Now she had a name. I asked Priya, without explaining why, to drive past that storage unit address on her way home from her part-time job. It wasn't a storage facility. It was a luxury apartment complex. Priya, sharp as her mother, took a photo of the building directory from the lobby without going further. Unit 412, C. Reyes. I had Monique run a discreet property search. Camille Reyes, 29, listed Daniel Cole as an emergency contact on her lease application. The $1,200 storage charge was rent, paid directly from an account Daniel had quietly opened using funds moved out of Cole and Ivory Events' operating budget, money that belonged to my company, laundered through vague line items marked vendor logistics. He wasn't just cheating. He was stealing from the business I built with my hands to fund the apartment of the woman he was cheating with, while filing paperwork to legally seize what was left of it. The final piece came almost by accident. My oncology nurse, Denise, mentioned in passing that Daniel had called the office twice asking for updated prognosis timelines for insurance purposes. I asked which insurance. She checked the callback log. It was the $400,000 life insurance company. He'd requested an accelerated benefits estimate, the payout calculation for if I died during treatment. 6 days after my diagnosis, dinner with another woman. 2 weeks after, a legal filing to take my company. 1 month after, calls to price out my death. I didn't cry that day either. I just started writing things down. I made a decision on a Tuesday in the infusion chair, watching the chemo drip into my arm one slow beat at a time. If Daniel believed I was fading mentally, physically, completely, he would get careless. Confident men who think they've already won stop being careful. So I decided to become the version of myself he wanted to see. I let my voice go soft and slightly slurred, the way it sometimes genuinely did after heavy doses, but I exaggerated it. I stopped correcting him when he helped me with paperwork I understood perfectly well. I let him see me stare blankly at the television for long stretches, a coffee mug going cold in my hands, my reading glasses pushed up into my scarf like I'd forgotten they existed. Inside, I was doing the opposite of forgetting. Every night after he thought I was asleep, I reviewed financial statements on a burner tablet Monique had set up for me, hidden inside a knitting bag Priya kept refilling with yarn as a decoy. I told him, at one appointment, in a small, wandering voice, "I don't really understand all this incapacity paperwork, Daniel. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's easier if you just handle things." He kissed my forehead like I was a child he'd successfully put to bed. That was the moment I knew the trap would work. I had Monique and a colleague of hers, an actual elder law and estate attorney named Ford Whitaker, quietly draft a new set of documents, a full revision of my will, an irrevocable trust that would remove Daniel as beneficiary entirely, and a corporate resolution transferring all shares of Cole and Ivory Events into an irrevocable trust for my 2 children, with Priya named as successor trustee the day she turned 25, completely outside Daniel's reach, incapacity filing or not. But first, I needed proof strong enough to survive a courtroom, not just a suspicion. I asked Priya to borrow my old laptop for a school project. Instead, at my direction, she installed a legal, disclosed home security camera in the study, recording video without audio in the shared common areas, and paired it with a voice memo app on my own phone. Left running and tucked inside my knitting bag whenever Daniel and Marcus talked business at the kitchen table. I also had my real attorney draft a decoy incapacity consent form and left it, half-signed, on my nightstand, where I knew Daniel checked my medication log every night. Then I waited. My phone buzzed once under a couch cushion 3 nights later, a voice-activated trigger alert. I opened the recording later, in the bathroom, water running so no one would hear. Daniel's voice. She signed the consent form. It's happening. Whitfield's filing it Monday. Marcus, and the trust for the business? Daniel. Doesn't matter what she thinks she's got. Once the incapacity ruling's in, I'm the one with signing power. Camille and I already picked out the house. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and listened to that twice. Then I called Ford Whitaker and told him, Friday. My eldest sister's 60th birthday dinner, 40 guests, at the restaurant Daniel had proposed to me in 20 years ago. That would be the night. Friday came. I wore the green dress Daniel used to say was his favorite, the one that now hung looser on me than it used to. I wore a soft blue silk scarf, the same pale blue as the one from our wedding day, the one Daniel had once called the color of new beginnings. I made sure he saw it. It meant nothing to him anymore. It meant everything to me, a promise he'd broken. Camille was there. Daniel had introduced her to my extended family for months as a colleague from the firm helping with estate logistics. Nobody questioned it. Sick people make convenient blind spots. Midway through dinner, my sister Alicia stood to make a toast. Daniel, 2 glasses of wine in and clearly feeling untouchable, leaned toward Marcus and said, just loud enough for the table to half hear over the clinking glasses, once this incapacity thing clears, I finally get to actually run something for once. 14 years of watching her play CEO. Camille laughed into her champagne. I set down my fork. I did not raise my voice. Daniel, I said, how's Unit 412 treating Camille? The climate control good for the linens. The table went quiet. Daniel's smile flickered. I don't know what you're. 6 days after my diagnosis, you were at Chez Laurent with your hand inside her collar, I said, calm as a doctor reading a chart. 2 weeks after, you filed an incapacity petition with Whitfield and Marsh to take control of a company I built from $1,100. 1 month after, you called my oncology nurse asking how fast my life insurance would pay out. Gasps. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel stood. This is chemo brain talking, everyone. She's confused. I have 3 months of bank records showing company funds paying Camille's rent, I continued, voice never rising. I have a recording of you and Marcus discussing the incapacity filing 4 nights ago. And I have this. I placed the consent form on the table, the decoy, the one I'd let him believe I'd signed. I tore it cleanly in half, the sound sharp in the silent room. I already transferred every share of Cole and Ivory Events into an irrevocable trust for my children. 2 weeks ago. Fully witnessed, fully executed. There's nothing left for an incapacity ruling to take. Ford Whitaker, seated 2 tables away as my invited guest, stood and calmly identified himself, informing the table and Daniel that the embezzlement of corporate funds to a third-party lease was already documented and would be forwarded to both the District Attorney's Financial Crimes Unit and the State Bar's Ethics Board. Given Whitfield and Marsh's role in filing a fraudulent incapacity petition against a mentally competent client. 2 officers, whom Ford had quietly arranged to be nearby given the financial fraud complaint filed that week, stepped in from the restaurant's entrance as Daniel tried to leave the table. Camille didn't even finish her champagne. She just left. Within 72 hours, Daniel was formally charged with embezzlement of corporate funds and filing a fraudulent legal petition, both felonies in our state given the dollar amount involved. His bail was set at $50,000. Whitfield and Marsh opened an internal investigation into the attorney who filed the incapacity petition without properly verifying my competency, a violation that cost that lawyer his license within 4 months. Marcus, facing potential conspiracy charges for his role advising the filing, quietly paid restitution and avoided prosecution, but was voted off the board of the family's construction business by his own father within the year. Camille, it turned out, hadn't known the apartment was funded through embezzled money, only that it was funded. When the story became local news, her employer, a marketing firm, quietly let her go over reputational concerns. I felt no satisfaction there. I made sure, through Ford, that the 7 employees at Cole and Ivory Events, none of whom had anything to do with any of this, received a written guarantee that their jobs, benefits, and pensions were untouched by the trust restructuring. I personally called each one. I finished my 18 months of treatment. I rang the bell at the end of my last infusion with Priya on one side of me and my sister Alicia on the other. Daniel was not there. He was 3 months into a plea deal that would keep him out of prison only if he paid full restitution and served 5 years of probation. It rained the night Daniel showed up at my door, 11 months later. Actual rain, the cold, sideways kind. He'd lost the house in the settlement, lost most of what remained of his savings to legal fees and restitution, and from what I heard, Camille had never spoken to him again. He stood on my porch, soaked through, a duffel bag at his feet like he expected to be let in. Ran. Please. I have nowhere else. I know what I did. I know I don't deserve. You're right, I said. You don't. I'm your husband. You were, I said. The trust is irrevocable. The company is my children's. There is nothing here for you anymore, Daniel. Not money. Not a marriage. Not a bed for the night. He asked, voice breaking, if I still had any feeling for him at all. I have my health, I said. I have my children. I have a company I built with my own 2 hands, twice now, if you count rebuilding what you tried to take. That's enough. I closed the door. Gently. No slam. Marcus, I later learned, had offered him a spare room out of some remaining sense of family duty. That was between them now. I turned around, and there was Ford, my attorney turned trusted friend and, eventually, something more than that, waiting in the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. He didn't ask what was said at the door. He just handed me a mug and said, "You did the right thing, all the way through." I know, I said. And for the first time in over a year, I actually believed it. If there's one thing my diagnosis taught me, it's this. Real love doesn't calculate what it can gain from your worst moment. It shows up in the mundane, boring, unglamorous middle of a crisis and stays. Anyone circling you during your lowest point, doing math instead of dishes, was never protecting you. They were positioning themselves. Protect what you've built. Trust your instincts when something feels off, even when, especially when, someone hands you a jargon-filled excuse for why it shouldn't. Have you ever had to play weak to protect something you loved? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that it's never too late to rewrite your own ending.